They say success is the best revenge. A tidy little platitude printed on coffee mugs and inspirational posters. They don't tell you what to do when success delivers your past to your doorstep, gift wrapped in a multi-million-dollar merger and acquisition deal. They don't tell you how the air crackles just before the lightning strike. The city was a glittering tapestry of mistakes and ambitions laid out 37 floors below my window. From here, the traffic was a silent, pulsing current of light, and the lives inside those cars were abstract concepts. My office was a minimalist cage of glass and steel, furnished in shades of charcoal and Arctic white. The only warmth came from the amber glow of the expensive whiskey in the crystal decanter on my credenza, a gift from the board after we closed the Sterling Cross deal. I hadn't touched it. On the 8K monitor that took up half my desk, hundreds of faces stared back at me. The employee roster from Sterling Cross. Little corporate headshots, all neatly organized by department, seniority, and salary bracket. I was supposed to be reviewing the key personnel we were retaining, these synergistic assets the M&A team kept crowing about. My finger, however, traced the cool glass of the screen, scrolling past VPs of marketing and senior project managers. I was looking for a ghost. My thumb flicked, and the rows blurred. Then I stopped. The algorithm had him filed under mid-level accounts director. Not junior, but certainly not the executive track he'd always been so certain was his birthright. David McIntyre. The photo was recent. His hair, which was once a boyish brown, was now artfully salted at the temples. The smile was the same, that easy, confident curve of the lips that promised you the world while subtly assessing your value. He wore a crisp, forgettable blue shirt, the uniform of a man who plays by the rules. The background was a generic mottled gray, the kind you find at a place that takes your passport photo in 5 minutes. It was the face of a stranger, and it was the face of the man who knew every line of my body, every one of my fears. My index finger rested on the screen, right over his name, a name I hadn't legally owned in 6 years, but a name that was once meant to be my future. A cold, clean shock went through me, a current connecting the woman I was now to the girl I had been. "Focus on us, Charlotte, on being a better partner," he'd said, his voice a low, reasonable hum over dinner at a restaurant I could now buy with a rounding error. "This ambition of yours, it's not exactly wife material." A sharp rap on the glass door to my office pulled me back. It was Nancy Taylor, my COO, and the only person who had been with me since the beginning, back when our corporate headquarters was my spare room and our biggest client was a local dog groomer. She slid in, her presence as efficient and reassuring as ever. She held a sleek black binder. "Final schedule for the integration town hall," she said, her tone professional but her eyes searching mine. She was the only one who could still read the subtle tells. "You're on at 9 sharp. I didn't look away from the screen. The introductory packets? Printed, bound, and waiting by the auditorium entrance, one for every Sterling Cross employee. The full Welcome to McIntyre Innovations top-tier experience. She'd used my name, the name I had reclaimed, the name now emblazoned in brushed chrome in the lobby downstairs. She did it on purpose. A quiet act of solidarity. "Good," I said, my voice flat. "Leave it." Nancy placed the binder on the corner of my desk, a deliberate, soft thud on the polished wood. She lingered for a second longer than necessary. "You good, Char?" I finally turned my head, meeting her gaze. I'd built a fortress around myself over the years, brick by painful brick. My expression was the final, unbreachable wall. I'm the CEO of a company that just doubled its valuation overnight, Nancy. I'm excellent. Her lips thinned into a line that was neither a smile nor a frown. She knew better than to push. Okay, boss. See you in the morning. She left, and the silence rushed back in. I swiveled my chair back to the monitor. David McIntyre, accounts director. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen from my desk, its cool, weighted metal, a familiar comfort in my hand. He had always hated this pen. Pretentious, he'd called it. A theatrical prop. To me, it was a weapon. The satisfying click as the nib emerged was the sound of an idea taking form, of a contract being signed, of a world being built. I clicked it now, once. The next morning, the clicking of my heels on the marble floor of the executive wing echoed like a metronome counting down to a moment I hadn't known was coming. I wore a tailored graphite gray suit, armor I had carefully selected for today's battle. Or was it a victory lap? I wasn't sure. He wanted me to be smaller, to shrink my dreams to fit the cozy 2-bedroom house in the suburbs box he had planned for us. He couldn't comprehend a world that didn't revolve around his. So I left, and I built my own world, a world so vast and bright it had just swallowed his whole. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy, emotional act. This was gravitational, a cosmic inevitability, the consequence of two objects set on entirely different trajectories, one of which happened to be the size of a planet. I reached the double doors of the main auditorium. On the other side, 246 employees of the newly acquired Sterling Cross waited to meet their new CEO. I could hear the low, anxious murmur of the crowd. My hand rested on the polished steel handle. In my other hand, I gripped the Mont Blanc. For a fleeting second, I was the 24-year-old girl again, packing a single suitcase, his condescending pity following me out the door. Then she was gone. I was Charlotte McIntyre, and this was my company. I took one deep, steadying breath. I clicked the pen. The sound was sharp, definitive. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the blinding stage lights, my eyes scanning the sea of unfamiliar, upturned faces, looking for the only one that mattered. The stage lights were hot and unforgiving, erasing the nuance from the faces in the auditorium and turning them into a single, expectant mass. My voice, amplified by the sound system, was calm and measured, a familiar instrument I had honed over years of board meetings and investor calls. I spoke of synergy, of future growth, of a new era of innovation. I sold them a vision of the future, a future I had built from the ashes of a past they knew nothing about. My eyes, however, were conducting their own search and destroy mission. I scanned the rows methodically, section by section. And then, about halfway back, tucked near an aisle, I found him. David. He wasn't looking at the stage. He was looking at the welcome packet in his lap, his brow furrowed in concentration as he read my bio on the second page. I watched as his eyes tracked the lines of text describing my career, my accomplishments, the company I had built. His posture was rigid, a man trying to make himself smaller in his seat. The easy confidence from his profile picture was gone, replaced by a deep, hollowed-out shock. He finally lifted his head, his gaze drawn to the massive screen beside me, where my own corporate headshot was displayed. He looked from the photo, but confident, formidable CEO, to me, standing at the podium. His mouth was slightly agape. For a breathtaking moment, I saw it all on his face. The disbelief, the dawning horror, and the slow, sickening realization that the world had not, in fact, revolved around him. He had been a planet in his own mind, and he had just discovered he was a forgotten moon orbiting a star he never knew existed. A surge of something dark and triumphant went through me. It was the taste of victory, cold and sharp as steel. I held his gaze for a fraction of a second, a silent acknowledgement across the crowded room, before seamlessly continuing with my presentation, never missing a beat. The mission was complete. Karma, it seemed, was a dish best served under the fluorescent lights of a corporate town hall. After the applause died down, my day was a blur of scheduled integration meetings. My calendar was a strict grid of handshakes and strategic evaluations. At 2 p.m., I was scheduled to meet with Jennifer Small, the project lead for Sterling Cross's flagship software, Helios. It was the single most valuable asset we'd acquired in the merger, and I needed to know if its leader was as good as the data suggested. A junior executive showed her into my office. Jennifer Small was younger than I expected, with bright, intelligent eyes and a nervous energy she tried to mask with a crisp blazer. She clutched a tablet to her chest like a shield. "Miss McIntyre, thank you for your time. It's an honor," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremble in her hand as she shook mine. "Charlotte, please." I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. "I've read the Helios file. Impressive work." A genuine smile broke through her nervousness. "Thank you. My team has poured everything into it for the past 2 years." For the next 20 minutes, she walked me through the project's architecture, its market potential, and its future development roadmap. She was brilliant, sharp, passionate, and utterly in command of her subject. She was exactly the kind of person I looked for, the kind of person I built my company around. She was, I realized, with a jolt, the kind of employee I had been all those years ago. The timeline for Phase 4 was set back a few months, I noted, pointing to a line on the projection I'd pulled up on the monitor. "The file cites personnel-related delays. Can you elaborate?" Jennifer's professional mask slipped for a second. She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "It was a personal issue. My fiancé. He had a health crisis about a year ago. It wasn't life-threatening in the end, but it was a long recovery. He's in the accounts department here, actually. He had to step back from a big promotion track to manage his recovery, and I wasn't exactly focused for a few weeks. I apologize if it impacted the project's integrity." The air in the room suddenly felt thin, the temperature dropping several degrees. My fingers went cold. "He's in the accounts department here." "Your fiancé," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "What's his name?" "David," she said, a soft fond light entering her eyes. "David McIntyre." The name landed in the silent, air-conditioned space between us with the force of a physical blow. The two names, hers and his, clicked together in my mind, forming a picture I didn't want to see. The triumphant CEO in me recoiled, replaced by a hollow echo. Jennifer, oblivious, continued. "He's the best person I know," she said, a quiet sincerity in her tone. "He hates that he had to pull back from work. Always felt he was letting people down. But he never let me down. Not once. Honestly, I couldn't have gotten through it or kept Helios on track without him." A memory, sharp and unwanted, sliced through the present. I'm in a restaurant. It's our anniversary. The lighting is warm, the tablecloth is white, and there's a small, unopened velvet box on the table between us. I've just told him I've been offered a junior partnership track at the small consulting firm where I work. It's a huge step, a validation of the 70-hour weeks I've been pulling. David doesn't look happy. He's swirling the wine in his glass, his expression thoughtful and just a little condescending. "That's great, babe. Really," he says, but the words are hollow. "But when will you have time for us, for a family? I just got the preliminary approval for the mortgage on the house." "We can do both, David," I say, my voice earnest. "I can do both." He finally looks at me, and his eyes are filled with a weary sort of pity. "Can you? Char, my career is about to take off. I need a partner who supports that. Someone who's home, someone who can handle things. This ambition, this constant need to prove yourself, it's not exactly wife material." The words hung in the air between us. Not wife material. It's not an accusation. It's a verdict. A calm, rational judgment that dismisses my entire identity. The dreams I'd had since I was a little girl, the drive that got me through college on a scholarship, the fire that made me who I was. He had just classified it all as a character flaw, an impediment to his happiness. "So what you're saying is, I have to choose?" I say, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying you need to focus on what's important," he corrects gently. "Focus on us, on being a better girlfriend." The memory dissolved, leaving me back in the cold, sterile reality of my office. Jennifer Small was looking at me, a hopeful expression on her face, waiting for my verdict on her project, on her future. She saw him as a man who sacrificed his ambition for her. I knew him as the man who demanded I sacrifice mine for him. Both things could be true. People can change. I had. I'd changed into the woman who now held the fate of her brilliant, unsuspecting fiancé and the man who broke her heart in the palm of her hand. The clean, simple narrative of karmic justice had just been irrevocably complicated. The file on my screen was no longer just about a valuable software asset named Helios. It was about Jennifer and David, their life, their future. I looked from Jennifer's bright, eager face to the sprawling city below. The lights were beginning to twinkle on. No longer an abstract tapestry, but a vast network of interconnected lives. My power, which minutes ago had felt like a suit of armor, now felt like a lead weight. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen, but my fingers felt numb. Clicking it felt like a momentous act, and I was no longer sure what that act would mean. Understood? The confrontation is imminent. Here is the next part of the story. The decision gnawed at me through the rest of the afternoon. My focus, normally laser sharp, was fractured. Every spreadsheet blurred, every email felt trivial. The conversation with Jennifer had recontextualized everything. My clean, satisfying story of karmic revenge was now a messy human drama, and I was holding the final scene in my hands. I could cut his entire department during the synergistic restructuring, a common and easily justifiable corporate bloodletting. It would be neat, impersonal, and devastating. Or I could do nothing and let him exist in my world, a ghost at the feast of my success, forever looking up at me from the middle of the corporate ladder. Neither option felt right. Neither felt like justice. They just felt like power. And power without purpose is just noise. At 6:30 p.m., my assistant buzzed. "Ms. McIntyre, David McIntyre from the Sterling Cross Accounts team is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." My heart gave a hard, single thump against my ribs. "Send him in." The glass door swung open, and for the first time in 6 years, we were in the same room. He was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe my office was just bigger. He wore the same blue shirt from the town hall, now slightly rumpled. He clutched a leather portfolio case, holding it in front of him like a shield. His eyes, when they met mine, were a maelstrom of shock, humiliation, and a desperate, flickering fear. I didn't stand. I remained behind my desk, a queen on her throne of glass and steel. I gestured to the chair Jennifer had occupied just hours before. "David, unexpected." He walked forward, his steps hesitant on the plush, sound-dampening carpet. He didn't sit. He stopped a few feet from the desk, a supplicant before the oracle. "Charlotte," he said, and the sound of my name in his voice was a relic from another lifetime. I had no idea. "No idea about what specifically?" I asked, my voice cool and even. "That I didn't curl up and die after you left? Or that the small consulting startup I joined eventually became McIntyre Innovations, the company that just bought your employer for 9 figures?" The barb hit its mark. He flinched. "Both, I guess." He swallowed hard, his gaze darting around the expansive office, at the floor-to-ceiling windows, at the name on the awards sitting on the credenza. He was taking in the sheer scale of the world I had built without him. "This is a lot to process." "I'm sure it is," I said. I picked up my Mont Blanc pen, turning it over and over in my fingers. The recurring motif. My weapon. The motion was slow, deliberate. "What do you want, David?" His eyes snapped back to mine. "I wanted to talk to you before the restructuring." He took a breath, steeling himself. "I know how this looks, and I know what I said back then. I was an idiot. I was young and arrogant, and I had this rigid picture of what my life was supposed to be, of what a wife was supposed to be. It was wrong. I was wrong." The apology was one I had fantasized about hearing for years. In my fantasies, it was vindicating, a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. But hearing it now, in this office, with Jennifer's earnest, trusting face swimming in my memory, it just felt hollow, pathetic. "You weren't just wrong, David," I said, my voice dropping lower. "You were a coward. You weren't scared I would fail. You were scared I would succeed. You needed to be the sun in our little universe, and you couldn't handle the idea that I might be a star in my own right." His face crumpled. He knew it was true. "You're right. I was terrified. You were so brilliant, so driven, and I felt like I was constantly trying to catch up. So I tried to slow you down instead. It's the biggest regret of my life, Charlotte. The single biggest mistake." He took a hesitant step closer to the desk, his knuckles white where he gripped his portfolio. "Look, I'm not asking for favors. I need my job. For Jennifer." My hands stopped moving. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the desperation etched around his eyes. This wasn't the confident man who had dismissed my dreams over dinner. This was a man fighting for a life he had built, a life that now depended on my mercy. "Tell me about Jennifer," I said, the question hanging in the air. He seemed surprised by the question, but he answered immediately, his voice filled with a raw, genuine emotion I had never heard from him before. "She's everything. She's kind and impossibly smart. When I got sick, it was a stupid infection that went septic. Months of recovery. I lost my spot on the executive track. I lost everything I thought mattered. And she never wavered. She worked all day on Helios and then came home and took care of me. She's the best part of my life. I'm marrying her in June." He finally placed the portfolio on my desk and pushed it forward. "This isn't about me, Charlotte. This is my performance file, my project history, my numbers. Judge me on my work. That's all I'm asking. If I'm on the chopping block, fine. But don't do it because of us. Don't let my mistake cost her." The thematic choice. It had arrived. Not in a boardroom, but here, in the quiet of my office at dusk. My revenge was no longer about him. It was about her. Punishing him would punish Jennifer, an innocent, a woman who embodied the very drive and talent I valued most. Letting him stay felt like a betrayal of the girl he had tried to break. I looked down at the portfolio, then back at his face. The power I held was absolute. I could destroy his career with a single email. I could make him pay for every condescending word, for every sleepless night I spent building this empire on the foundation of his dismissal. Or I could choose something else. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out and put my hand on his portfolio. I didn't open it. I pushed it back across the polished desk, toward him. "You're right about one thing, David. You were an idiot," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I watched the last bit of hope drain from his face. "But," I continued, holding his gaze, "your performance review isn't my primary concern right now." I leaned forward, the pen still in my hand. "Jennifer Small is a major asset to this company. Her project is the centerpiece of this acquisition. I have no intention of disrupting her life or her work. That would be bad for business." Relief washed over him so powerfully, he seemed to sag on his feet. "Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said, my voice hardening again. "This isn't forgiveness, and it isn't a favor. It's a business decision. You will report to your new department head, you will meet your targets, and you will spend every single day of your life making sure that woman, Jennifer, has everything she needs to succeed. You will be the partner to her that you were never capable of being from me. Is that understood?" His throat worked. "Yes, absolutely." "Good." I stood up, the motion a clear dismissal. "Now get out of my office." He didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his portfolio and practically fled, the glass door whispering shut behind him, leaving me alone in the vast silence. I walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. The triumph I felt wasn't hot or vengeful. It was cold, clear, and absolute. I hadn't destroyed him. I had redefined him. His entire professional existence was now predicated on my success, and his personal happiness was contingent on him supporting the ambition of a brilliant woman. It wasn't karma, it was irony, and it was so much better than revenge. I looked at the Mont Blanc pen in my hand. He thought it was pretentious, a prop. He was wrong. It wasn't a prop. It was a scepter. A week later, I stood in the same spot by my office window, looking down at the same glittering cityscape. The sun had set, and the buildings were beginning to light up, each window a tiny story in the sprawling narrative of the city. My office was dark, save for the cool white glow of my monitor. The frantic energy of the merger had subsided, settling into the steady, powerful hum of a newly enlarged machine. My machine. On the screen was an inter-office memo, a dry corporate document announcing the final organizational chart for the newly integrated departments. It was full of names and titles, a blueprint of my kingdom. Under the Advanced Software Solutions division, Jennifer Small's name was listed as Senior Director, a promotion. Beneath her, several layers down in the hierarchy, was the name David McIntyre, Accounts Director, a survivor. Just another cog. I closed the document. The work was done. The confrontation was over. The ghosts that had haunted the edges of my success had been met, assessed, and filed away. I had expected to feel a surge of something, elation, vindication, even the bitter satisfaction of a wound finally cauterized. Instead, I felt a profound stillness, a quiet emptiness. The victory wasn't loud. It wasn't a firework display over the city. It was the deep, resonant silence after a bell had been rung. The echo. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from Nancy. Drinks at the aviary, board signed off on your bonus, time to celebrate the Empress. I smiled, a small, tired curve of my lips. 6 years ago, a text like that would have been unimaginable. My world had been so small then, defined by a 2-bedroom apartment and the suffocating weight of someone else's expectations. Now my world was this: the glass, the steel, the view, the power to create, and if I chose, to destroy. I texted back, "On my way, you're buying." As I gathered my things, my eyes fell on the crystal whiskey decanter on the credenza, the one from the board. I hadn't touched it since it arrived. It felt like an artifact from a different person's life, a trophy for a game I was no longer playing. On impulse, I walked over, uncapped the heavy stopper, and poured 2 fingers of the amber liquid into a thick-bottomed glass. The rich, peaty smell filled the air. I didn't drink it. I just held the cool, weighted glass in my hand, swirling the contents slowly. He told me to focus on being a better girlfriend. I focused on being his boss. That had been the hook, the rallying cry, the engine of my ambition for so long. It had propelled me out of his life and into this one. It had fueled the lonely nights, the impossible deadlines, the moments of crippling self-doubt. It had been the chip on my shoulder that I'd sharpened into a weapon. But standing here now, in the silent aftermath, I realized the truth. My success wasn't about him anymore. Maybe it had been in the beginning, but somewhere along the way, in the thrill of a closing deal, in the camaraderie of building a team, in the sheer unadulterated joy of creating something from nothing, it had become about me. My ambition wasn't a flaw. It was my center of gravity. He hadn't been an obstacle to overcome. He had been the catalyst, the dumb, blunt force that had set the avalanche in motion. I had won. But the prize wasn't his defeat. The prize was this office, this company, this life. The woman I saw reflected in the dark window was not the girl he had left. She was someone harder, colder, yes. But she was also someone who was utterly, unshakably her own. I walked back to the desk and placed the whiskey glass down, untouched. Next to it lay the Mont Blanc pen, my scepter. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. It wasn't a symbol of my victory over David. It was a symbol of my victory over the girl who had almost believed him, the girl who had almost shrunk herself to fit his world. With a final, satisfying click, I retracted the nib. My revenge wasn't a single fiery act of retribution. It was the quiet, undeniable fact of my own existence. It was the cool glass of the skyscraper under my feet and the silent, pulsing city laid out before me, waiting for my next move. He would go to work tomorrow in a building with my name on it. He would cash a paycheck with my signature on it. And he would go home to a brilliant woman whose career I was now personally invested in fostering. His punishment wasn't a demotion. It was a life sentence of being a footnote in my story. And I was just getting to the good part.